Alright guys, let's talk about the German economy today. Because what's happening right now isn't just a slowdown, it's a collapse. Germany, once the industrial engine of Europe, the pride of precision, the heart of European manufacturing, is hitting an inflection point, and not a good one. The EU and Berlin are standing at a crossroads with very few escape routes left. Every door they open seems to slam shut just as fast. Europe is now facing a triple threat, and it's unlike anything we've seen since the post-war era. First, the war with Russia has bankrupted their reserves and sent energy prices through the roof. Second, China is flooding global markets with cheap goods that no European factory can match. And third, Trump's return to tariffs is the final nail in the coffin. Together, they're squeezing the life out of Europe's biggest economy, and it's starting to show in every sector. The collapse begins with the auto industry. Bosch, one of Germany's proudest engineering icons, is cutting 13,000 workers. That's not just a number, that's a signal flare. Volkswagen is scaling back production because demand is vanishing. Germany's auto sector has lost over 50,000 jobs in just the last 2 years. For decades, German cars defined excellence. Audi, Mercedes, BMW. They were status symbols across the globe. But now, they're playing catch-up to China. BYD, NIO, and even Tesla are sprinting ahead in electric vehicle innovation, while German automakers are still stuck in bureaucracy and slow adaptation. And here's the hard truth. They waited too long to pivot to EVs. Now, while they're cutting costs and shedding workers, Chinese factories are rolling out electric cars faster, cheaper, and smarter. Germany's once mighty industrial backbone is cracking under pressure. And the situation goes far beyond the auto sector. When Berlin decided to cut itself off from Russian gas, it was a political move, but an economically suicidal one. They pledged to buy USLNG, liquefied natural gas, instead. The problem? It's 4 times the price of Russian pipeline gas. Let that sink in. Europe has pledged around $750 billion to secure U.S. energy. But at those prices, how can European manufacturers compete with the U.S. or Asia? You're literally running a marathon while everyone else rides an electric bike. And as the U.S. enjoys cheap domestic gas, China and the BRICS nations are buying discounted fuel from Russia at bargain prices. So while Europe drowns in energy costs, its competitors are thriving. This is why European chemical giants like Ineos are cutting back on production. 2 major units in Germany are closing, with hundreds of jobs disappearing. And the scariest part? These aren't just random plants. They're the facilities that produce critical inputs used in defense, medicine, and renewable energy. When those close, Europe loses its ability to manufacture key technologies domestically. So where will those materials come from next? You already know the answer: China. And that's how the EU's trade deficit with China will explode even more. Brussels is already furious. But unless they reverse those Russia sanctions, Europe's collapse will keep accelerating. Let's put Europe's cost structure in perspective. Producing in Italy or Germany costs 3 times more than producing in the US. Energy, labor, regulation, everything is pricier. Meanwhile, the Middle East, Asia, and the US all enjoy cheaper energy supplies. Europe has no large domestic oil or gas reserves left to fall back on. So if I'm a global manufacturer, why would I buy expensive European materials when I can get the same product for 1/3 of the cost from the US or China? This is the fundamental flaw. Germany's industrial dominance was built on cheap Russian gas and efficient exports. But now, both pillars have collapsed. Demand for European industrial goods has plummeted, and it's not coming back anytime soon. So what is Berlin's answer to all this? Rearmament. That's right. The new strategy is to rebuild Germany's defense industry to boost domestic demand. The government has announced an $80 billion defense spending plan, one of the largest in modern history. The goal? To create new demand for metals, chemicals, electronics, and machine tools. It's a clever idea on paper. Use military spending to kickstart the economy. But there's a catch. Government spending like this is incredibly inefficient. For every dollar you spend, you might get 50 cents of real economic output. It's a temporary boost, a band-aid on a deep wound. Sooner or later, that money runs out, and Germany is left with more debt and no long-term growth. And even though this massive rearmament plan is meant to build European-made weapons, the irony is painful. Only 8% of the contracts will go to the U.S. defense industry, like Boeing or Raytheon, meaning Washington isn't too happy either. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, things aren't much better. Washington is also trapped. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the man managing the American purse strings, is panicking. He was supposed to push through a $20 billion bailout for Argentina under President Milei's reform plan. That money would have stabilized Argentina's collapsing economy. But suddenly, Washington pulled back. No bailout, no liquidity injection, just currency swap lines. In other words, a glorified loan with interest, without any real commitment. The U.S. is essentially saying, we'll lend you dollars temporarily, but you'll pay us back with interest. And when your peso collapses, that's your problem. It's the kind of arrangement a loan shark would love. The U.S. wants zero risk, no liabilities, no bad debt on its balance sheet. Why? Because even America's own economy is now showing cracks. Trump's trade war has boxed Washington in. He's focused entirely on rebuilding U.S. industries domestically, mining, lithium, semiconductors, anything that could strengthen America's self-sufficiency. The U.S. government now owns stakes in companies like MP Materials, Lithium Americas, and Trilogy Metals. The message is clear: bring manufacturing home. But here's the problem. U.S. production is incredibly expensive. So while the U.S. may feel good about reshoring, it can't actually compete with the low-cost powerhouses abroad. That means America can't afford to throw around bailout money anymore. Not to Argentina, not to Europe, not to anyone. The global trade war has trapped both sides. Europe is drowning in energy costs. The U.S. is suffocating under debt and inflation. And now we get to the most fascinating shift of all: the collapse of trust in the U.S. dollar. Around the world, central banks are quietly backing away from U.S. bonds and shifting into gold. Look at the data. U.S. Treasuries now make up less than 20% of central bank reserves worldwide, and that number is falling fast. Why? Because every time the U.S. uses its currency as a weapon, through sanctions, trade wars, or asset freezes, it scares other nations away. So what's the alternative? Gold. The timeless store of value that can't be printed or seized. Central banks, especially in BRICS countries, have been buying gold like mad for the past 15 years. And now, even private investors are joining in. And guess what? Gold prices have smashed past $4,000 an ounce, a historic all-time high. That's not just a number. It's a message. It's a warning that trust in paper money is fading. Goldman Sachs had predicted this would happen by 2026, but the rally arrived 2 years early. Now they're forecasting $4,300 by the end of next year. And if private investors move just 1% of their dollar assets into gold, prices could skyrocket past $5,000 an ounce. So what's fueling this? It's simple: fear. Fear that the U.S. economy is sliding into recession. Moody's has already warned that 22 states are showing signs of contraction, with 15 more barely staying afloat. And when the U.S. enters a recession, we all know what comes next: money printing. It happened in 2008 when the Fed printed $1 trillion to rescue Wall Street. It happened again in 2020 when the government unleashed $5 trillion during the pandemic. And if the trade war triggers another crash, we could see a double bailout, one for collapsing industries and another for struggling consumers. That means trillions more dollars flooding into the system, devaluing every existing dollar in circulation. And every time that happens, what do people do? They run to gold. Because gold doesn't lie, it doesn't go bankrupt, it doesn't need a bailout. So, what does all this mean? It means the old order, the one built on US hegemony, cheap European exports and dollar supremacy, is cracking before our eyes. Germany's industrial miracle is fading, the EU's energy strategy is backfiring, and the US is printing money just to stay afloat. The global balance is shifting, and fast. Gold is rising because trust is falling. And the deeper this economic war goes, the more nations will seek independence, whether through gold, BRICS alliances, or new currencies. So what do you think? Can Germany and Europe still save themselves from industrial decline? Can the US survive another wave of money printing without breaking its own economy? And how high do you think gold can climb before this is all over? Let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, stay sharp, stay informed, and stay prepared. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dive geopolitical analysis, and drop a comment to share your take. Because the more we talk about these global shifts, the more we understand the truth behind the headlines. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.